So here we have two Warhorns that I have cut differently, the mouthpiece on them. It actually makes a pretty big difference in the kind of sound that you're getting. This one was the first one I ever did, and I kind of messed up a little bit on it because I made that the mouthpiece so wide. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. It means that there's less of a narrowing before the horn kind of opens up, and the less of a narrowing you have, the harder it is to get it to envelop the sound. This I just so happened to cut off right before, it would have been too short, but ideally you want something about no wider than that as the hollow part. But I'm going to show you, at least for me, this is what I like to do. If you just have a regular old Dremel, and you can kind of widen just the outside lip of this to make it easier to fit your lips onto and easier to play. I personally find those teeny tiny holes, especially ones that are like that size, are just really hard to, position your lips around to play. So actually what I'll do is I'll just like the 1/8 of an inch or so, or maybe a 1/4 inch at most, that I'll widen, from the thickness of it, and then I'll probably come about out to here, all the way around in diameter, but I won't go any deeper than about 1/8 of an inch probably. So I'm going to take the Dremel to it, smooth out the edges, and then I'll show you what it looks like after I finish that, and then I'll compare the two, the difference of what they sound like. So now if you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's kind of hard to tell, but there's a slant there. It's much easier to put your lips on that way, and play it that way than a teeny tiny hole. And again, this one wouldn't make too much difference because it does have a bigger hole. Now if I had done this absolutely perfectly, that hole would have probably stopped about right there, so it probably would have been 2/3 the size of what it is. But it should still be a lot better than that massive hole because it's got probably at least that much more narrowing than my other other cow horn does. Which, by the way, these are just domestic cattle. They're actually eco-friendly because someone salvaged the horns, took care to actually salvage even the bones and the horns instead of just wasting them and throwing them in the trash. The only one of my, bigger horns like this where you can't just stick something up in there and see how long it is because it's too long. The only one that I got the nail on the head with that had the exact right spot was the Gemsbach horn, and that one is the easiest to play, and it's envelops the sound a lot, and it has just the general shape of the Gemsbach horn has such a much longer time of narrowing before it gets to the end too. So part of it has to do with the shape of the horn. But we'll see. Test this out and see how it plays in comparison to the other one. This is the Gemsbach mouthpiece. If you look at how narrow that hole is, that's the one I hit the nail on the head with. And because it was so narrow, I had a little bit more room to play with. And because the shape of the horn too, that it stayed narrow for longer, I had a lot more room to play with the mouthpiece. And so I was able to kind of really hollow out that mouthpiece a little better with the Dremel. But unfortunately with the cattle horn, the narrowing on it isn't as long, and so I didn't want to dig any further into that opening, the actual opening of the horn itself, and so I couldn't do that. But this is what ideally you would want to get it all kind of hollowed out like that. That's going to be your easiest to play, but it'll still play just fine the way we've got it. So what I mean by hitting the nail on the head, this is the tip that we cut off of the cattle horn. And if you can see that, it's kind of getting dusk here. If you can see, there's still a hollow part right there on the other side of the horn. And it actually goes in, I know you can't see from the camera, but it goes in about that far. So almost an inch that I was off. I would have wanted to cut it here, but I cut it here because I misjudged. That's not much. Cow horns always surprise me because the bone goes so far up into the tip a lot of times. But the other one that I cut off, you know, it's weird. The other one I cut off had a really long tip that was solid, and you know, it was actually, that's part of the reason why I messed up, because you know, it was this plus some, and it was still solid. It wasn't hollow yet. And so I got impatient and just, you know, scooted over way too far, and then said, you know what, and just sawed it off way far up the horn, which I shouldn't have done. I should have just kept inching my way up. You want to always start back. If you want to get it exactly right, you want to start further back than you want to, but that just means that you're sawing through solid horn, which takes forever, especially if you use it with a handsaw, like I was doing, handsaw and Dremel, and that's all you got. You know, it's going to take forever. So what I do is, you know, I don't play it safe, unfortunately. And I didn't. If I was going to play it safe, I would have started right there and then gone there and then gone, you know, until I found the hollow spot. That just takes so much more time, and I just, you know, I figure close enough, you know, and just chop it off, you know. And you know, if I had to guess, I would probably guess that it could have started there, because that, how much narrowing there is with the tip, it makes sense that the bone would have stopped about right there. So, you know, the hollow part is where the bone used to be, and the horn is just the keratin. So what you're trying to find is that sweet spot where the bone stops and the horn starts. And unfortunately, I'm about that far off on this one. So that's what I mean by hitting the nail on the head. When I had cut the gem spot, this was solid. The tip, the whole tip was solid, and then the other part of the horn had a hollow opening. So that was nail on the head, because the part I cut off was totally solid, and the part that that I was going to keep had that opening. So it's hard to get it exactly, and you don't have to get it exactly. It's just, you know, especially with a horn that widens quickly, like a cattle horn, it's a little more easier on you if you can get it more closely accurate, because that narrowing is part of how it makes that amplified sound. Without the narrowing, if there's not enough of it, it actually won't play. It won't amplify sound. We're going to compare the difference between these two horns, the one with the really wide opening, and the one with the really medium narrow opening. And this one is actually easier to play than this one. This one, like I said, it does work, but you've got to find a sweet spot on it, or it doesn't want to play at all. This one isn't the easiest ever to play, but it's definitely much easier than this one. So we're going to start out with the one with the very wide mouthpiece on it, and see how that one sounds. Enough, even though this one is the most temperamental when trying to make that typical Warhorn sound, these amplify any noise whatsoever. Just in case you mess up like I did and you make the hole a little bit too big, it's probably still going to work, unless it's like way down here that you chopped it off. It's probably still going to work for a regular Warhorn. You just have to work a little harder to get it to make a sound, and it can work for other noises too. So, you know, don't throw it away. So now we've got the other one. Let's see how this one sounds. Kind of the gist of how the different size openings and the different mouthpieces will vary the sound. I hope that helps.